Welcome back to Spank Ranch Garage. We are getting closer and closer with the buggy. It runs and starts now. One thing I've been neglecting is building a shifter for it because it's not going to be easy, and I just didn't want to do it. So anyway, what makes this a little challenging is because it's mid-engine. We've got this Subaru Trans flipped around backwards, or backwards for a Volkswagen, normal for a Subaru. But typically in the Subaru, you're going to be shifting it from the driver's seat, which is behind the transmission. Unfortunately, my driver's seat is up there. So we need to come up with a way to actuate this rod in and out and also twist it left and right. And I got some ideas for that. Let's kick it off. I had some cables built that I think will be sufficient for this, or as sufficient as it's going to get, I'll say. And then we're going to utilize this shifter from China for a Honda F series. No, it's for a Honda K series from China. And we're going to run this shifter backwards. The shifter's supposed to sit this way in the front wheel drive car. You can turn it around and run it backwards. I was going to run a Toyota MR2 shifter, but this was $89 for this whole billet aluminum machine shifter with lots of adjustability. I would have paid probably 200 bucks for a used MR2 shifter. So screw that. Shift knob, not a real pattern on here, but this is a sentimental knob to me. My dad put this on my first go-kart that I had when I was really little, and then it lived in my Beretta for another like 5 or 6 years. And I'm always looking for just a project to run it on. So that's gonna stay. I know the pattern doesn't make any sense, but it makes sense to me. So anyway, first step is gonna be interfacing these cables to this shifter. They don't fit the shifter. This is built around using factory Honda cables, if I had to guess, and these aftermarket cables are just kind of totally wrong in every way. So first task is going to be getting the cables to fit the shifter, and then we will route them to the rear of the transmission and develop a way to translate that motion into a typical 5-speed pattern. Modifying the shifter to work with these American cables. Everything's 1/4 inch and 1/4 28 thread on these, and I want to keep that standard. I'd rather modify the shifter than the cable or the cable ends. That way, if it ever needs a new cable, I just buy one off the shelf, plug it in. All the wear items are commodities at that point. So first thing was turning down the shoulder bolt here, and that way that fits this 1/4 inch cable end. But other issue, 1/4 inch cable end does not fit in the actual shifter. So let's mill this out, make some clearance there, and then we'll have to repeat the same process for the side-to-side shift mechanism here. That needs to be milled out a little bit as well and have that bolt turned down. All right, so the cable now fits the shifter, and with the cable in the neutral position, meaning we're centered on both sides, the actual cable outer mounting here is way off, right? This is what you'd have on the Honda. These universal cables are like this. It's gonna be even worse on the side-to-side shift cable. There will be a little bit of stagger, because you can see here, but this needs to move as well. So I'm probably gonna gut this whole piece and make my own probably from steel. Shifter is very easy to modify, at least. I mean, it's so modular. How can you make all these billet aluminum pieces, this whole thing, buy the material, machine this, package it, send it from China, put it on eBay, make some type of profit on it, and then ship it to my house for $89? I will never understand that, but I will happily indulge in these types of products. While it lasts, you gotta enjoy it, I guess. This is the idea for the shifter. I have it mounted just one bolt. Nice grabbability right off the wheel, right to the shifter. Yet it's not interfering with the seats. Now this thing is tight. This buggy is just tight. I mean, these seats are almost kissing each other. You got 2 inches in between. Seats are basically touching the cage on the outside. There's not a lot of room in here for activities, unfortunately. So the cutting brake is out of the question for the minute. I do have a plan for that, but that's got to get, that's a whole nother ball game. Anyway, so basically I'm just lining up these cables and putting them in a position where it's going to do what I need. But basically, these cables are going to have to be mounted somewhere back here between the seats, like this, to get that kind of action going on. Chipping away, chipping away. Got the brakes plumbed, the clutch plumbed, everything's bled. I have no idea why the fluid that came out of all the new clutch was so disgusting. It's a little caught off guard by that, but anyway. The prototype shifter is complete and installed. This is disgusting looking, but this is a proof of concept here. So we need to test this. Basically, the trans doesn't like to shift gears without you being able to put the clutch in, so I had to finish the clutch to test the shifter, yada, yada, yada. So let's give this thing a look. Here though, fourth gear. Looks like I can get reverse. There's reverse. We had to do two things when you build this shifter. One is to get your front and back motion, which on a Subaru, pushing the shaft forward would put you towards first gear, while pushing it back would bring you towards second. That works pretty good with the flipped Honda shifter because then it's directly connected to my shift shaft. So when I push forward, the cable shortens and then the transmission pushes forward like that, right? All right, so that part was easy. That was basically just put a lever and a ball joint to this cable, and the cable will push the transmission forward and backwards. The more complicated part is when you need to turn your hand going left to right. That needs to be translated into motion. That's going to turn this Subaru shift shaft left and right. And with the way the Honda shifter works, when I push the shifter to the left, like to go over to first gear, it pulls on the cable, which then I translate that motion with this L piece here to actually turn the Subaru part downwards. So let's look at it from the back. All right, so this goes forward, that comes down, this pushes up, that goes this way. Now this actually is a pretty tight shifter. I have a lot of slop in this shaft to collar interface though. See, all of that is in there. I have a solution to fix that, but that'll come at a little later time. This will at least get me going and get me going through the gears. You might be asking, like, why is this so complicated? And why are the levers all different lengths? And there's a couple of reasons for that. And the first reason is I had to build a lot of leverage on the left and right side of the shifter. And what I mean is, like, you know, if you've driven a car with a super tight short throw shifter and you put it in first gear and, you know, second gear is 2 inches back, and then third gear is a ½ inch over and 2 inches forward, and you know, you've got a ½ inch between your gear sets. I don't want that in an off-road buggy that I'm going to be bouncing around in and going down rough trails. You have too much of a chance of money shifting that way. So I wanted to build a little, I'd say, buffer space into this shift system to give me more of, you know, more of a leeway. So now I move the shifter over, you know, 1.5 inches to get the first gear, and I move it 1.5 inches the other way to get to the fifth and reverse gate. So I have a lot more play room there, but it's still pretty tight front to back. So you can still shift quickly. It's just, it's not super tight to where, you know, if I'm sitting wrong in the seat by 1/4 inch, I'm gonna shift from second to first instead of second to third. So I wanted to eliminate that. And the way I did that is, you know, I'm gaining motion with each of these levers that are different lengths. So say this lever here is 2 inches, this one's 1.5 inches. I gain a little bit there. And then I gain a large amount back here where I have, you know, this 4-inch lever off the shift shaft here. So basically I take almost 1 inch of translation in either direction and turn that into what the Subaru Trans needs to go to the first gear 1-2 gate, 3-4 gate, and then fifth reverse gate. Now, like, why did I do this and all this? Well, it gets more complicated because let's say you're in first gear, which would be over this way and in. So now you're in first gear. If I was going to shift the second gear, this is going to stay in the same position, and we come back to second gear like that. If this linkage here was super short, it would be changing on a big, you know, it'd be really tight radius, and it would actually make your shifter up front, your shifter would actually run the radius of that linkage. I brought this up intentionally to run a longer link here to be able to minimize those effects. And this shifter actually feels really linear. Like, it literally feels like you're connected directly to the gearbox, which is cool. Other than, obviously, like I said, this slop that I'm dealing with here. I'm gonna weld a sleeve on this and through bolt this and slit it. That way this thing clamps its shaft, holds on that way. But that's at a later date. So anyway, otherwise, this thing is pretty solid. Let's test it out with the actual shifter. First gear, second gear, third gear, fourth gear, fifth gear, and I think that's reverse. I don't know if that's in there. No, that's not in there. There's reverse. So obviously it doesn't like to shift too well with the engine not running, and this trans is dry as well from all the work I've done to it. Well, I got a little too excited literally crashed right in front of my truck. But it is July, and I did drive the buggy. Like I said, wasn't much of a drive, made it about 30 feet, got in an accident, broke the fog light out of my truck. Probably took out a little bit of the front fascia, but you know that does happen on these bigger jobs. My brake pump was sitting in front and that got smashed. Freaking idiot. There is some silver lining though. This buggy has never had reverse in the time in which I owned it. The Volkswagen Trans, the reverse was blown out of it. It had just the base of the teeth left on the reverse gear. So if I held that shifter into reverse with 2 hands, I could get it to roll backwards on flat ground, but that was it. Anytime we were in the woods and I had to turn around, it was, you know, get the winch out or start pushing, whatever. So it's cool to have 5 forward gears and 1 reverse gear. Gotta figure out these brakes. Not impressed with that. Did not expect to crash into my truck tonight, but that's what I get for being a total retard and just going out there and not even testing them after making a repair. So always check your brakes before you go riding. I'm pretty sure most people know that, but I didn't, so I needed to learn that.
Oh, did you get it?
Gino, are you drinking? It looks stupid, and I don't know, will I get tired of turbo noises right in my ear? Potentially. That will clear my temporary tank mounting position. I'm gonna move the fuel tank up here. Doesn't actually touch the seat. Just looks a little ridiculous being right next to my head. However, for staying clean, that is probably the only spot on this buggy that doesn't get blasted with mud. So that may actually play out all right there. What I want to bang out is get the fuel pressure regulator dialed, make sure that's not causing us any issues. So she's set currently at 55. That is, I would think, plenty. I've been researching online. If I had to guess at this point, and with what I know, this ECM and just this direct injection system in general is probably pretty close to a Gen 5 LT motor, the motor that replaced the LS. There's guys running them up to 72 PSI, but that's the highest. Looking at the calibration on this ECM, it looks like it wants about 300 kPa, which is about 45 PSI or so. But there's not actually a sensor hooked up, so it doesn't know. All it needs is positive supply of fuel to the high pressure fuel pump. So I'm gonna leave this right as is at 55. I don't think that's anything to worry about. Nope, just not having it. We're gonna open up HP Tuners here, plug into this 2018 Chevy Cruze, and see what kind of codes we have, and take a look at our fuel pressure during cranking, things like that. See if we can determine why this thing doesn't start without a little snort of starting fluid, then it runs. Well, I've been out here tinkering for almost 2 hours with the tune, and I still cannot get this thing to start without a spritz of starting fluid. And it's weird because it's got spark, it's got no fuel injector pulse width during cranking. As soon as that thing kicks the first cylinder on starting fluid, the injectors come alive, high pressure fuel pump starts running, desired fuel pressure follows the actual rail pressure perfectly. It does a great job. This is becoming a thing now. I'm gonna need some alone time here to get to working on this. I'm armed with more information, and that information makes me sad because I think we have a pretty big issue on our hands here regarding this starting issue. I'm gonna try a couple more things, and we'll just happen to see if that Hail Mary works. If it does not, we'll get into the solution. Just gonna suck. Writing another tune. So see how this is an E80A ECM? Apparently the 16 and 17 Cruzes had just the standard E80. A guy online's telling me he tried one of these with an 18-19, never got it to work, but he got a 16-17 to work. Maybe I end up buying a 17 ECM for this just to get it going, but we'll see. Back on the electrical fun again, putting these Deutsch connectors in here for throttle position and for the OBD2 port, any other things that have to be plugged in. Got the boost sensor wired up here to the intercooler, all nice and welded on. Just got the computer up here to confirm that it's communicating. Got the blow-off valve, I think is working. The wastegate is working. The alternator is charging. We're looking pretty good on that. I still got some codes that won't go away. I don't know what the deal is with that. And really the point of putting these connectors in here is getting rid of this crap. Well guys, I've been jamming off camera. Moved the radiator up like 2 inches like I said I was going to. We've got a cooling fan on here now. Really pulls some air. We'll see if we get away with this little rad. I'm concerned, a lot of viewers are concerned, I totally get it. Moved the fuel tank up to the top here. I'm not in love with that solution, but it is at least a safe temporary solution to put some miles on this thing before I build a real tank. Redesigned the fuel system again, so there's less hose, just a little simpler. Finished up some more wiring, though there's, you know, it's not my best work so far. It's got a lot of cleaning up to do, but I want to start this thing up and actually get it up to temperature for once. It's never actually been up to temperature. It's never had coolant in it until now. So just putting water in it. I want to let it run, let it get warm, cycle the fan, you know, see if I can get some of these codes to clear. And then ideally fire this thing up in the morning and go for a ride tomorrow morning. Just around the yard to see how she's doing. But tell you what, this thing runs like a little sewing machine once it's warmed up. I mean, I can have a casual conversation right behind an open exhaust here. Just such a tiny little engine, very quiet, no lifter ticking, really you can hear the injectors a little bit and that's it. Warmed up, idles about 670 RPMs, that's what it's commanding. Coolant temp, we're up to 201 on the coolant. I'm waiting for the thermostat to open. We're finally putting hot coolant through the rad. Oh yeah, nice and warm. So I will kick that fan on and see if we can control the temperature. But otherwise, I mean, this thing just runs very nice. Does not miss a beat. Well, boys, I got a little too excited. Just had to take her for a ride tonight. Got the headlights strapped in, ripped around the yard a little bit. The turbo noises are ridiculous. That air filter being right behind my head, probably not gonna fly. The blow-off valve is insane on this thing. And it's computer controlled, so it's just like, it's on and off, doing its thing, modulating, it's just nonstop. Otherwise, seems to drive well. The clutch pedal is very low, so it makes shifting a little difficult, but I ran first, second, third gear and reverse, we're all good. This thing seems to make tons of low end torque, just as I was hoping, because, you know, when you're dealing with the Subaru Trans, you don't have the, you know, the super low gearing you'd have on like a 5 rib or a 3 rib. But anyway, I'm gonna pack it up, go to sleep. We're gonna wake up tomorrow and go spank on this thing a little bit and get some videos, see how it sounds, and see if all this hard work pays off. Well, on further inspection here, it looks like we lost the cage and it allowed the balls to run wild, free balling it. So, will this be a repeating issue? Probably. We're all skeptical of these axles, the angles they're at, the country they're made in, the technology they employ. The Buggy does run, drive, do everything it should. I still got to put a passenger seat in. I still got to clean up wiring, finish welding on the shifter column up front there. And the whole starting thing, that'll probably be a whole nother episode, but I've purchased a 2016 ECM instead of this 2018 one. I believe that's going to be an E80, where this is an E80A. So I got a bit of jamming to do before then. What? I got a bit of jamming to do before then, but we will get it done. We always do. I do feel bad that I didn't get to film a little more of it running. I was very excited to ride this, so I was out ripping all morning, and then when I brought the camera out, I broke it on the third lap, so that's kind of how it goes, but there will be plenty to come, so stay tuned on that. This episode got awful long, pretty quick, but I guess to my defense, there was a lot of work to happen here. So there's still a lot of work to happen, unfortunately. Already have 2 more axles sitting out front, ready to go in. I want to do a full investigation on why this axle broke, so that'll be coming up in the next episode. I need to get this thing on the dyno and see what's happening. I don't think it's making anywhere near its rated power. It makes way more than the 40 horsepower Volkswagen did, but I have a feeling it's in some type of limp mode, waiting for the automatic transmission, so we'll get that covered. And then we'll be heading down to West Virginia to go ride this. It's probably not going to be... It's not going to be a full 3-day ride at Hatfield McCoy like we did 3 years ago. We'll probably just go putt around the property and maybe, you know, explore some local trails, but something pretty chill. I'm supposed to leave in like 6 days, and this thing's just not, the confidence level isn't there to go out on a big trip by myself. So anyway, thanks for watching Spank Ranch Garage. Let me know what you think in the comments, and we'll see you real soon.